Right now, the latest Mission Impossible is playing in theaters and showing good numbers. The movie is on track to earn $200 million on its global box office opening weekend, potentially to be the highest of the franchise. Although the film had a $400 million budget, it is still a substantial amount. Everyone wants to see how the franchise will end, and will there be a worthy ending for Ethan Hunt. Because of this, I wanted to review all the Mission Impossible films, share some lesser-known facts and rumors, explain key plot details, and analyze the filmmaking, especially the stunts. No more waiting, let's get started. Before Mission Impossible became one of the longest-running and most gripping action franchises in history, it started out as a smart, intelligent TV show. Created by Bruce Geller, the original Mission Impossible aired in 1966. It quickly stood out for its clever, twist-filled plots, and high-tech gadgets, and a cool, methodical tone that emphasized teamwork over brute force. The show's iconic opening, complete with self-destructing tape and Lalo Schifrin's iconic theme song, set the standard for spy thrillers long before Ethan Hunt ever appeared on the screen. The TV series remained a beloved classic for decades. But it wasn't until the early 1990s that the idea of turning Mission Impossible into a feature film began to take shape. Tom Cruise was not only of Hollywood's biggest stars, but also he was a seasoned producer, and he was looking for a project to launch his fledgling production company. He'd grown up watching the original show and was drawn to its intelligent and sample-driven espionage story. In many ways, Tom Cruise saw Mission Impossible as a way to modernize a beloved property while simultaneously transforming it into something entirely new. Translating the concept to the big screen wasn't easy. The first film released in 1996 and directed by Brian De Palma, who by the way was the director of the movies like Scarface and The Untouchables. And he faced a difficult challenge. How did he take a slow-burning TV show and reimagine it for a blockbuster-hungry 90s audience? The answer was to blend the original's intelligent DNA with a cinematic style full of tension, deception, and precision. Brian De Palma brought his signature visual style and suspense-driven storytelling, while Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt became a new kind of action hero. He was resourceful, he was vulnerable, and driven by instincts more than ego. The reinvention became core to the franchise's identity. Each film was helmed by different director, each with his own style, and each installment pushed the boundaries of stunt work and practical action. Tom Cruise wasn't just a star, he became heart of the franchise, constantly looking for ways to elevate the action through real physical risks. As the films evolved, the Mission Impossible style became defined not just by the espionage, but by Tom Cruise's commitment to performing as many stunts as possible, often for real. The franchise's identity evolved into a mix of old-school espionage, cutting-edge filming, and surprising emotional core. Where the original series was cold and calculating, the films warmed up, focusing on dedication and told the job takes on those who live it. Through it all, the pulse of the franchise remained the same. Impossible missions, bold plans, disguise and deception, and the feeling that somehow, against all odds, the team would find a way out. Right now, it's kinda weird to see the first Mission Impossible instead of colorful cities like we used to see in the latest parts. We see the cold, stylish and cerebral Prague, and not typical for the serious, gloomy atmosphere. Obviously, the first part was the most important one, setting the franchise for the success. All the iconic moments and tricks come from this movie. Tom Cruise's dedication for doing his own stunts also started from here. For example, his first dangerous stunt was in the famous scene filmed in an expensive restaurant in Prague, which ends with Ethan Hunt blowing up a giant aquarium wall. Originally, the production planned to use a stunt double for that moment, but when director Brian De Palma and Tom Cruise watched the early takes, something felt off. The audience could tell it wasn't Tom Cruise. The cutaways felt too staged, the tension wasn't translating, and the scene lacked immediacy. And he then volunteered to do the stunt by himself, even though it involved timing the blast perfectly and running through a real wave of pressurized water with broken glass and debris. He knew that if he was visible on camera in that moment, without cutaway or a mask hiding his face, the audience would believe it more. And they did. The result was the dynamic, single-take shot of Tom Cruise bursting through the water. From the beginning, Tom Cruise was not just the star of Mission Impossible, he was also its producer. He had acquired the rights to the original 1966 TV series with the goal of creating something bold and cinematic. As a producer, he had the creative freedom to shape the tone of the film, and as an actor, he wanted the audience to believe what they were seeing. That meant minimizing doubles, reducing CGI, and making the action feel as real as possible. In the first film, directed by Brian De Palma, Tom Cruise famously performed the vault scene himself, the one where Ethan Hunt suspended on cables inches above a pressure-sensitive floor. Though it wasn't a dangerous stunt in the traditional death-defying sense, it required incredible physical control. He insisted on doing it himself because he believed it created a more visceral, honest performance. That moment became iconic, and it was the beginning of a philosophy that would define the franchise. At the time, Mission Impossible did something almost no other blockbuster dared to do. It killed off most of the main characters in the opening act, and not just any characters, but seemingly central ones, including big-name stars like Emilio. We went in expecting a traditional team-based spy film, much like the original 1966 TV series. But within the first 20 minutes, almost every member of Ethan Hunt's team is brutally and suddenly killed during what seems like a routine mission in Prague. Again, not typical for the franchise now, and definitely not typical for the blockbusters of the time. It told the audience that no one is safe, not even beloved or recognizable actors, except for Tom, of course. The film genre is spy thriller, and what spy thriller is without super gadgets that don't exist in real life? Disguise masks. The lifelike latex masks made their first major film appearance here and became synonymous with the Mission Impossible franchise. And hacking tools and spy glasses. And of course, self-destructing messages. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Became an instantly iconic line and ritual in each movie. It honored the original TV series and established a fun, retro-futuristic tone. Overall, the first mission was great, and surprisingly, some fans still claim that this is their favorite part. I kinda agree with that. Side characters were good, especially Luther was a great companion for Ethan. He was the only character that stuck with him in all 8 movies. The film subverted expectations by killing off most of the team early and set the stage for Ethan Hunt to become the isolated, ever-adapting hero we now associate with the series. And with it brought back the joy of smart, high-tech espionage gadgets, used not for show but as essential tools for survival. In terms of iconic presence, stunts in the first part were better, but this time in the second part, the stunts became more creative and took on a larger scale, all because of the director, John Woo, a well-known director for his action movies. A Hong Kong film director's resume has movies like The Killer, Face Off, Broken Arrow, and of course, the second Mission Impossible. The second Mission Impossible undeniably accomplished was elevating Tom Cruise's stunt game to new heights, literally. The movie opens with an unforgettable sequence, Ethan Hunt free solo climbing a massive red rock formation in Utah. No ropes, no stunt double, just Limp Bizkit's explosive music and Tom Cruise. After the smart, noir-themed spy thriller that was the first Mission Impossible, the second installment took a sharp turn. This time, the espionage seemed secondary to the style, making the film more of an action opera than a mystery thriller. It felt more like a romanticized battle between good and evil than a classic spy mission. If the first film was subtle and cerebral, the second film was pure adrenaline. Mission Impossible 2 features some of the franchise's best action scenes, none more famous than motorcycle duos and of course backflips, tire burns, slow motion pistol shots. It was wild and it was definitely John Woo style. While the realism and grounded tension took a backseat, the film leaned into fantasy and redefined how far this franchise was willing to go visually. For me, it felt like a plot was thin. The story about a genetically engineered virus called Chimera and a rogue IMF agent trying to sell it felt overly melodramatic and predictable. The villain lacked depth, and some character motivations felt more like plot devices than genuine arcs. But despite the story's shortcomings, Mission Impossible succeeded in evolving the franchise's action. It showed that Mission Impossible wasn't just about spycraft and masks, it was about scale, cinematic power and reinvention. Even though it's often seen as the weakest in the series narratively, Mission Impossible 2 did a few crucial things like expanding the global scope of the franchise and raised the bar for real, practical stunts that would only grow in intensity in future films. The third part starts with an unusual scene. Instead of showing another good stunt, they showed Ethan tied up in a chair, hopelessly watching as a gun was pointed at his wife. Very unusual for the character, because in general, we don't see Ethan being this hopeless about the situation. Usually, he always believes in the team and his own abilities, but only a great villain can create such fear, especially to the mighty Ethan Hunt. But that's why Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance was phenomenal. The villain was so good, in fact, one of the reasons that Owen Davian still stands as the best Mission Impossible villain of all time is that he really changed Ethan Hunt forever. Unlike other antagonists who try and fail to defeat Tom Cruise's super spy, Davian managed to hit Ethan where it hurts. Furthermore, the effect of Owen Davian is revealed in later Mission Impossible movies. He's one of the few villains who succeeded in killing someone close to Ethan Hunt. Early in the film, Davian implants a chip in Lindsay Ferris' head, detonating it as Ethan watches helplessly. Having trained Lindsay, Ethan is genuinely affected by her death, especially since he was the one who cleared her for duty. In later Mission Impossible films, Ethan becomes incredibly protective of his fellow IMF agents, refusing to put them in harm's way. Mission Impossible 3 also gave us for the first time a look at Ethan Hunt the person, not just a spy. He is engaged in trying to settle down. This version of Ethan Hunt wasn't just a lone wolf super spy. He had a home, a love, and something to lose. That shift, introduced by first-time director J.J. Abrams, gave the franchise a beating heart. It felt the stakes not because the world could implode, but because one man could lose everything. Doesn't mean Mission Impossible 3 lacked action. Not at all. The Vatican infiltration, the Bruges attack, the Shanghai skyscraper jump. But this time, the action served the character, not the other way around. Every mission tied back to Ethan's need to protect the people he loves. There was a sense of real consequence, especially in how the movie juggles spycraft with the merits of secrecy, betrayal, and sacrifice. In the end, Mission Impossible 3 wasn't just about saving the world. It was about saving one life, and the man who risked everything for it. And that's what truly redefined Ethan Hunt and the franchise. By the time Mission Impossible 3 hit theaters in 2006, the franchise was at crossroads. While the third film delivered emotionally rich storytelling and introduced deeper character arcs, underperformed at the box office compared to expectations. Behind the scenes, there were also concerns about the long-term viability of the franchise. Each installment had been directed by a different director, with wildly different styles. Brian De Palma's gritty and suspenseful tone in the first, John Woo's stylized action in the second, and J.J. Abrams' emotional and character-driven approach in the third. The series lacked a consistent identity, and many viewed it as simply the Tom Cruise show, rather than a unified spy saga with an evolving team. That all changed with Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This fourth entry marked a soft reboot of the franchise. Rather than wipe the slate clean, it resurrected the formula, creating something more cohesive, team-based, and visually dynamic. It introduced a new tone, sleek, fast, and globally expansive, with a renewed focus on humor, teamwork, and massive practical stunts. The reason for this reboot wasn't just creative, it was strategic. Tom Cruise was already in his 40s, and Paramount wanted to future-proof the franchise. Initially, there were even rumors that Tom Cruise would pass the torch to Jeremy Renner's character Brent, but something happened that no one predicted. Ghost Protocol was a smash hit, both critically and commercially, and Tom Cruise, reinvigorated and more committed than ever, didn't hand the franchise off, he reclaimed it. Overall, the franchise's stakes got higher and more epic. Tom Cruise's famous running got a signature cinematic style, and also shot it beautifully with enormous sandstorm behind. More and more iconic scenes were added to the franchise. For example, let's take the Moscow Kremlin scene. Till this day, it's one of the most memorable scenes from Mission Impossible. Creative spy gadgets were used. Benji finally joins the dangerous missions and adds some comedy elements to lighten up the tense situation. One of the key elements that redefined the franchise was the Burj Khalifa sequence. Tom Cruise refusing to use a stunt double, scaled the tallest building in the world, thousands of feet in the air. It wasn't just a stunt, it was a statement. That one scene reminded audiences what made Mission Impossible unique. Real stunts, real danger, and real commitment. You probably didn't notice, but the director of the Ghost Protocol was Brad Bird. He's responsible for cartoons like The Iron Giant, both part of The Incredibles and Ratatouille. Even though he was mostly directing animated films, his job with those projects was incredible. And Brad Bird was instrumental in involving Mission Impossible from the Ethan Hunt show into a true ensemble spy thriller. He brought emotional weight and humor to each character, giving them distinct personalities and arcs. Like I said earlier, Benji stepped up as a comic relief with heart. Brent brought depth and mystery, and Jane added intensity and vulnerability. Bird envisioned the IMF not as a faceless agency, but as a family of broken people trying to fix the world together. Bird also pushed for a globe-trotting big screen experience. The film spans Moscow, Dubai, and Mumbai, but the focus always comes back to personal stakes. Whether it's Brent's guilt, Jane's loss, or Ethan's secret burden, Bird's vision was to tell a human story wrapped inside a blockbuster. Brad Bird's direction not only gave Ghost Protocol its identity, it reinvigorated the entire franchise. He balanced jaw-dropping spectacle with emotional beats, humor with tension, and individual moments with team chemistry. From there, the franchise evolved into what we now recognize, a blend of spectacular, grounded action, globe-trotting espionage, and a tight-knit, recurring team dynamic. Benji, Luther, and the other allies that would form the heart of the series alongside with Ethan Hunt. Finally, they added my favorite character, played by one of the most underrated actresses of modern days, Rebecca Ferguson. Her character Ilsa and Ethan's chemistry was remarkable and freshened the series. She was by far the best female character in the franchise. Ilsa's presence injected the franchise with something it hadn't fully had before, a truly complex female lead, who could stand toe-to-toe with Ethan physically, emotionally, and intellectually. She became a fan favorite instantly and redefined the dynamic of the team. Christopher McQuarrie brought a tighter, more sophisticated style of storytelling to this series. Unlike the world-hopping chaos of Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation was more controlled, more tense. He looked to classic spy stories, especially Bond films and Alfred Hitchcock thrillers, to create smarter and more elegant Mission Impossible. Instead of relying on doomsday threats or endless explosions, he built tension through atmosphere and suspense. The result was a film that felt darker, more intimate, and more mysterious. McQuarrie added a more European spy thriller tone. The villains, especially Solomon Lane, were quieter, more philosophical, and menacing in their calm. You could feel the influence of Bond's elegance and Bourne's toughness, but with Mission Impossible's unique flavor of daring stunts and relentless pacing. The Vienna Opera House scene is one of the most powerful moments, not just in Rogue Nation but in entire franchise. McQuarrie crafted it as an homage to Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, combining high art with deadly stakes. It's slow and stylish, built on tension, movement, and silence. There are no loud explosions, just a spy stumbling through shadows, while Puccini's Turandot hovers in the background. It proved McQuarrie's point, that action can be built with precision and patience, not just chaos. Ultimately, Rogue Nation delivered a more mature version of Mission Impossible. It was stylish, understated, and confident. It didn't have to scream to be exciting, and thanks to McQuarrie's vision, it laid the groundwork for an even more ambitious fallout, deepening the emotional core and expanding the franchise's identity. Here we come, the peak of the franchise. Mission Impossible Fallout. Everything that we love about Mission Impossible is done perfectly here. Mind-blowing stunts, plot twists, good villain, everything. Directed once again by Christopher McQuarrie, Fallout built directly on the events of Rogue Nation, making it the first true sequel within the first Mission Impossible series, and giving the narrative a sense of consequence that hadn't been fully explored before. Christopher McQuarrie's direction is meticulous. His use of practical effects, long takes, and real locations enhances the tension and immerses the audience in the action. Instead of shaky cam or CGI-heavy sequences, we get visually clear, grounded action scenes where the camera lingers just long enough to appreciate the physical effort behind every stunt. Whether it's breathtaking halo jump, the high-speed motorcycle chase through the streets of Paris, or the rooftop chase in London. These set pieces are shot with clarity and precision that make them feel visceral and real. Tom Cruise once again performed all of his stunts, including the halo jump filmed at 25,000 feet and the rooftop chase during which he famously broke his ankle, but continued the scene to complete the shot. His commitment gives every frame a sense of authenticity that's hard to fake. What sets Fallout apart is how he treats Ethan Hunt not just as a superhuman action figure, but as a man guided by unwavering principles. This film digs deeper into what motivates him, his refusal to let innocent people die even when the greater good is at stake. That moral compass becomes the center of the film's conflict. Unlike many action heroes, Ethan Hunt is defined by his choices, not just his abilities. And Fallout challenges him every turn. The stakes feel personal, not just global. Fallout begins with a simple but urgent premise. 3 plutonium cores go missing, and Ethan Hunt and his team are tasked with recovering them. But what sets this apart from previous missions is the moral dilemma presented early on. Ethan chooses to save his teammate Luther instead of securing the plutonium, causing a global threat to spiral out of control. From that moment, Fallout establishes itself as a film about the cost of loyalty, and how Ethan Hunt's compassion could be both his strength and his greatest vulnerability. This decision haunts the team throughout the film, especially as the Apostles and the mysterious terrorist John Lark set a plan in motion to cause mass destruction. The story evolves from traditional spy mission into a race against time, where trust is constantly tested and betrayal lurks in every shadow. There are some clever twists in Fallout that are really important, not just for the shock value, but because they change the direction of the story and that test the character's principles. One of the most impactful is the reveal that August Walker, played by Henry Cavill, is not just a CIA watchdog, but actually John Lark himself, the very man Ethan was trying to identify and stop. What makes this twist so successful is that it's seeded with subtle clues, but it still lands with dramatic force when it's revealed. And unlike the previous films, the consequences of failure are constantly looming. Ethan doesn't always outsmart his enemies easily. He often finds himself on the losing end, racing against time, making difficult choices, and dealing with the fallout of previous missions. The addition of Henry Cavill as CIA agent August Walker brought a powerful counterbalance to Ethan. Physically imposing and morally ambiguous, Walker wasn't just another villain. He was a direct challenge to Ethan's methods and ideals. Their dynamic culminates in the brutal bathroom fight scene, which became one of the most memorable moments in the franchise, due to its raw choreography and grounded brutality. Fallout also benefits from the most consistent and emotionally resonant team dynamic in the franchise. Ving Rhames Luther, Simon Pegg's Banshee, and Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa. No one feels like a filler or comic relief. Each member is given the moment of agency and emotional complexity. Ilsa's role is especially significant. Torn between loyalty to MI6 and her personal connection to Ethan, she adds an unpredictable edge to every encounter. The chemistry between her and Ethan is nuanced and unspoken, never veering into forced romance, but filled with tension and mutual respect. Fallout strikes the most complete balance in the franchise. It's not just about the spectacle, but also about character, consequence, and the story. It respects its audience by crafting a narrative that has twists with weight, decisions with cost, action that tells a story rather than simply decorating it. It's the kind of film that could only exist after 5 previous entries, taking the best elements from each one and elevating them into a nearly perfect action thriller. Let's start with the elegant pacing. For a film that clocks in at nearly 3 hours, Deadly Reckoning rarely drags. The tension builds effectively across the globe, from the Arabian desert to Rome, and finally the Alpine train sequence. The film is structured more like a leisurely thriller than a cutthroat action film, which works to its advantage in the first half. You feel the gravity of what's happening. There's a sense that something sinister and unstoppable is coming. It feels like the beginning of the end for Ethan Hunt. The car chase through Rome is a highlight. Sleek, funny, and thrilling. The decision to pair Ethan with Grace in a tiny yellow Fiat creates a physical comedy dynamic we don't usually see in these kinds of films. It's a grounded chaos, and a welcome change of pace from the high-speed CGI-fueled chases we often see in the modern action films. And then there's a train sequence, as a true showcase of practical effects and the mounting stakes of Mission Impossible. From the infiltration to the explosive climax and the vertical escape through the falling train cars, this is a pure blockbuster craftsmanship. It feels like a throwback to the best of the series. Creative, real, and on the edge. Where Dead Reckoning falters is with its villain and a plot. The central threat, the Entity, a smart artificial intelligence, feels too abstract and impersonal. For a franchise built on double crosses and face mask reveals, facing off against a faceless AI lacks drama. And as human proxy, Gabriel is unfortunately one of the series' weakest antagonists. He's meant to represent Ethan's dark mirror and a ghost from his past, but his motivations are paper thin and his presence never feels dangerous or layered. He's calm, smug, and uninteresting, which is a problem when the film wants to present him as the force behind key character death. Of course, Ilsa's death. Killing off Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa, arguably the most compelling addition to the series since its inception, felt emotionally hollow. Her death is treated almost as a footnote. The film doesn't give Ethan or us enough time to process it, and of course it undercuts much of the emotional investment built on previous films. That said, Dead Reckoning succeeded brilliantly in its marketing. The behind-the-scenes video of Tom Cruise riding a motorcycle off a cliff, shot practically with no digital fakery, was a stroke of genius. It reminded us of what sets these movies apart: Tom Cruise's absolute dedication to giving us real stunts, real danger. And yes, the stunt itself, placed near the film's climax, is breathtaking. It's not just thrilling, it's a symbol. Tom Cruise is literally throwing himself off a cliff to save the movie industry. And in many ways, that's what Mission Impossible has become. A love letter to big screen filmmaking in an era of streaming and shortcuts. In the end, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is technically superb, sometimes brilliant entry that unfortunately doesn't land all of its emotional or narrative beats, though it lays the groundwork for a grand finale. But with the loss of Ilsa, a lackluster villain, and an AI plot that feels too conceptual, it leaves a strangely muted aftertaste. Still, it's impossible not to admire the craftsmanship. The stunts are as jaw-dropping as ever. The pacing is tight, and the commitment from Tom Cruise and Emma Gorey is undeniable. If nothing else, Dead Reckoning is a testament to how far this franchise has come, and how much is willing to risk to keep movie magic alive. Not much to talk about this film. I have already told and shown everything I think about this film in the previous video. It was just wild to see Tom Cruise's journey for the whole 30 years. He has been an inspiration for many actors. In one of the interviews, he said that he tries to watch movies every day despite his busy schedule, and that shows how much love he has for cinema and filmmaking. He had studied pretty much everything about filmmaking and cinematography before making Mission Impossible. Tom has a lot of good movies and outstanding performances in terms of acting, but we will remember him mostly because of Mission Impossible franchise and his fearlessness towards dangerous stunts. From hanging off of a plane in Rogue Nation, to scaling the Burj Khalifa in Ghost Protocol, to piloting helicopters and jumping out of airplanes at 25,000 feet in Fallout, Tom Cruise has transformed himself into cinema's last great stuntman. Every Mission Impossible movie has at least one amazing central stunt, but what sets them apart from other blockbusters is how those stunts are filmed and executed. They don't rely heavily on CGI. They're physical, practical, and often pushed to the absolute limits of what's safe or even possible. Each film treats its action not as a filler, but as storytelling, a way to reflect character, build tension, and surprise audience in visceral ways. Each film is also a passport to the world. From Prague, London, and Vatican to Dubai, Vienna, Paris, Kashmir, Rome, and Norway, the franchise thrives on its international scale. These are not generic backlot locations. They are woven into action and culture of the story. In many ways, Mission Impossible is a celebration of world cinema, showcasing architecture, landscapes, and energy that make every entry feel fresh. It's not just about seeing Ethan Hunt save the world, it's about seeing where he's doing it. Beyond the location, each film has a distinct directorial voice. Brian De Palma brought mystery and tension. John Woo turned it into a stylish ballet of action. J.J. Abrams injected emotional stakes. Brad Bird brought a scale and wit. And Christopher McQuarrie, now the franchise's guiding hand, has elevated the series into something operatic, balancing thrills with personal consequences. Each film doesn't just continue the story, it reinvents the approach. That constant evolution is what keeps the franchise alive. While Ethan Hunt is always at the center, the supporting cast has become an essential backbone. Luther, Benji, and Ilsa provide more than a comic relief or backup. They bring texture, warmth, and depth to the story. Ilsa in particular became a standout, often feeling like an equal to Ethan in both skill and complexity. These aren't just side characters, they're family, and their evolving relationship give the series a soul that many action franchises lack. Ultimately, what makes Mission Impossible unique is the marriage of spectacle and sincerity. It's one of the few franchises where bigger doesn't mean dumber, and where the drive to outdo the previous films comes from passion, not just profit. Tom Cruise's commitment to excellence, the creative freedom afforded to each director, and the physical commitment to real stunts, and the emotional arc of trust, loyalty, and sacrifice have transformed Mission Impossible from just another spy franchise into something far more enduring.